I stared up at the ceiling of the infirmary room I was in. It's been 3 days since I first woke up. 3 insanely boring days of me sitting in hospital bed, eating hospital food, and only interacting with the one nurse that came to give me food. Luckily, she didn't mind talking about her life to some kid willing to listen. And hearing about her ex was still better than hearing nothing. Silence was the sweet music of insanity, after all. I wonder where I remember that from, I muttered. There was a knock on the door. Come in, I exclaimed. The door opened and a blond boy peeked in to look at me. Hey, I was. Hey, I heard you were ready to take some visitors? Well, ready for all of us to visit you, anyways. All of you? I asked. Well, the doctor said you were having some memory problems, so I thought you might need to have some reintroductions. He stepped out of the doorframe and let a rather large group of people walk in after him. Alright, cool. I tried not to seem too happy, but I doubted I kept that large, goofy smile off of my face that well. I'm. That nurse never told me my name, I sighed to myself. It's Decker. A blonde haired girl walked in and took a seat. Decker Lionheart, a white haired girl added. Oh, that's cool, I smiled. You also fought using a deck of cards, a dark haired girl said. Huh, typical. You had your own special brand, and I doubt you'd be happy to hear it, but we kept one of your decks since they were pretty cool. She handed me a deck of cards. I took out a card and looked at the ace face on top. I was a fighter? I asked. You are a fighter, a very good fighter, an orange haired girl insisted. You infuse all of your cards with dust. I blinked at that. Dust. I think that meant the raw power of nature. I nodded to myself. This does feel familiar. But have you ever seen me use this? I placed the cards down and held out my hand, reaching in front of me before a blade appeared in my hands. It had a rather strange design for most weapons, but it felt so natural to me. The way the black metal hilt was inside a small black circle with a black metal feathers to decorate it. It would probably make it harder for my hand to get injured during a fight. At the end of the round hilt was a silver chain with a rosary at the end. The blade consisted of two thin black metal struts with a similar wing design that was on the hilt, up to two sharp crimson curved blades, and half a cross on the other side with a crimson three-pronged crown occupying the space between them. I don't think any of us have seen that before. I feel like I fought with this a lot though, as well as this deck, I said. I looked down at my blade before putting it aside. Anyways, I blinked. I held my head in my hands as a sharp pain shoots through my mind. Ow, does remembering stuff always feel like this? Because it kind of feels like someone is force feeding data into my brain. What do you remember? Names and faces, and that Blake doesn't like me for some reason, and that Nora hits very, very hard. And that's all you need to know. Nora pounced on me. Your memories proved correct as Nora's absurd strength proved all struggle to be futile before someone cleared your throat. So you just remember things that'll keep you from getting hurt? Ren asked. I guess you could say that, I said. Now I don't know where I live or whatever, but if you could show me where that is and have me never talk about someone's stupid relationship problems again, that would be great. Nora easily hugged me over her shoulder, ignoring the last bit I said, and happily bounced off, leaving the group behind. Then we have a little time skip. Alright, we aren't too far away. She gave me a rib crushing hug, and I hugged her back. I'll try to keep that in mind, I said. I tried the door and found that it was locked. Alright, you lost your scroll, she said. I summoned my blade and tapped the door with it. The door clicked open and I walked in. Don't be afraid to visit, I said. Unless I'm in a bad mood, then don't visit. I closed the door behind me. I noticed that there were 4 beds in this room and I scratched my head at that. I shrugged and headed into the bathroom trying to figure out how to work the shower. The next day, during sparring, after a long day of school, of seeing a long, after a long school day of seeing unfamiliar faces and not knowing what in the world the teachers were talking about, I was happy to be in sparring and secure a seat nearby people that know me. Like, I know that I have amnesia. I get the feeling I was pretty stupid when I had all my memories. Well, you know certain stuff, like math, Ruby said. You're really good at math. Yeah, that still made sense. With this talk of Grimm and Aura is way behind me, I said. And history is probably very far out of my. Um, Goodwitch is calling you, Parent interrupted. Oh, right. That is my name. I said, now, how do I get down? Pyrrha gave me a push, and I went flying toward the stage. I felt like I should have ended up tumbling down onto a bunch of students, but mysteriously made it to the stage in one piece, before rolling on contact with the ground and shooting up to my feet. Nailed it! I brushed the dust off me. So what did you need? I looked toward the frustrated blonde woman. It is time for your fight with Mr. Daichi. She sighed and adjusted her glasses. I looked up at the large man with a almost as large sword. I nodded. Cool. What are we fighting? Each other, she sighed. Well, are you sure you're ready for this level of combat? She asked. I shrugged. Maybe my body will react well enough. I winced a bit and looked back up at the guy. Oh. Yeah, you don't like me, do you? He drew his sword and I got the gut instinct to use my cards. They were to be thrown, and the big guy looked like he would crush my blade with his bare hands. I found a few cards off my deck. Looked at the dust imbued cards, and I wonder how I could possibly have afforded to do this. Begin. I looked at the massive blade about to come down on me. My blade fashioned to my hands, and I sidestepped while deflecting the strike to the opposite side of me. Maybe I will need some practice with my cards using in, or at least not start so close to an opponent. He raised an eyebrow at me before slashing it at me in a wide arc. I thrust my blade out to the side, using the flat of it to deflect. He backed up, switching into a defensive position. I pointed the tip of my blade toward him, and he froze in place. I dashed forward, slashing at him as I passed him before, turning on my heel and slashing at his back, ending with an uppercut before I jumped back, throwing my blade and appearing onto it, slashing at him before spiking him into the ground. I jumped back and sighed. He unfroze and took a step forward before wincing, and he turned around before feeling the effect of my attacks and being launched into the air. Knowing I had a few more seconds before that would be over, I turned to look at my friends and saw that they're all gawking at the sight. So I guess this is something new then? I scratched the back of my head. And that is the match, I heard a male voice say as I turned to look toward a light gray-haired man as he stepped up beside Goodwitch. The larger boy crashed into the ground and I turned back to look at him. Is he gonna be alright? I asked. Yes, now come. I believe there is something we must discuss. Oh. Alright, I said. So, Decker, what exactly do you remember? He placed a plate of cookies down in front of me. Before waking up, nothing. Like, I remember the names of my friends, at least on I've seen so far, I said. You don't remember your team or how you ended up in the infirmary, he asked. I shook my head, glancing at the cookies. Was I a bad guy? I asked. He sat into a seat across from me. What makes you ask that? He inquired. Well, I could tell some nice people didn't like me, I said. Well, I wouldn't say that you were a bad person. You, like any other person on the planet, simply had a fault. He said. I heard a door open behind me, and I turned to see a girl walking up to us. She locked eyes with me before backing up, only to be slowly encouraged forward. Do you recognize this girl? I looked at her, and my eyes looked up towards her rabbit ears. I recognized the face. I felt my eyes shut as 100 images flashed into my head, all of them with her crying, and the image only stopped as one memory played through my head. I picked her up by a collar I had placed on her. There, that looks so much better on you. If you're still here by tomorrow, maybe I'll buy you something even better, I said before leaving her chained up to a tree deep inside the emerald forest. I was exhausted, mentally and spiritually. My blade flashed into my hands, and I looked down at it before looking back up at her. Bleh, 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 bleh. The fucking. Where the fuck am I? I doubt it means much, but I'm sorry. I let my magic flow out through my blade, and it might be hard to believe, but I promise to change. I let the blade float in front of me. I swear it not only on my heart, but I swear it on a kingdom full of hearts. The room was filled with projections of hearts containing smiling faces. So please give me one chance to redeem myself. She remained silent, looking around the room. All right, she nodded. You get one chance. I believe that will suffice for now, Osmond said, his eyes strayed down to my sword. I'd hate to ruin the mood with questioning, he put on a smile, so I could probably accept another sit-down session at a later time. Time skip. So after that, I headed toward a ice cream shop with Velvet. So what do you like to do for fun? I asked. Oh, I'm into photography, she smiled, taking out her camera. I love taking pictures of everyone, she said. Wait, what is this? I asked. I made a sour face from the unaccepted flavor of ice cream. It's carrot cake ice cream, she said, smiling. And here I thought it'd be racist to assume that. Well, it is racist to assume that. I was simply right this one time. It's my favorite, she smiled. I think I could use a few chocolate chips. I went back over to the dispenser and let it rain chocolate until the ice cream became edible again. She held in a giggle as I came back with a small mountain of chocolate chips. A few? She asked. Alright, so maybe you're healthier than me, I chuckled, carefully mixing the chocolate chips in. But at least this way our both of our tongues will be happy. I smiled. She blinded me with a flash of her camera. Sorry, but you never used to smile around me, she said. Well, you better get used to it, seeing... Yeah, better get used to seeing it. 'Cause I made a promise to you, didn't I? I tried the ice cream. Ah, perfect. Offered her a spoonful. I'd rather not put that much sugar in me, she said. Suit yourself. I shrugged and I noticed someone in uniform give us a bill. She passed it directly to me. That'll be 20 lien, the shades wearing girl said. I scratched my head. Is that what our currency is called? I whispered to Velvet. Velvet nodded. I took out my wallet and I blinked at a counter on the side of it. Huh. I didn't know my wallet would have a counter on it. 25... 25,000 money? The hell is money? I tapped my wallet and a 20 appeared, and I also single money. My god, I'm rich. I handed over the credit and turned back to Velvet. Let's go spending after this, I said. She put her hands up. No, you don't have to do anything like that, she said. Velvet, if a guy invites you to go shopping, you've got to accept. It'll show you just how much they're willing to spend on you. I said. Wait, am I being too aggressive? I asked. No, I don't usually have guys want to buy me stuff. Hey, we've only been talking for like 10 minutes now, and I can tell if my blood turns into sugar, it'll be because you finally did something too cute for me to handle. She blushed and shook her head. Let's get home. We still have school tomorrow. Right. I really need to learn how to read again. You can't read? She asked. It's been a long and confusing day, I sighed. She gave me a warm hug and I blinked, staring at her at an earpiece. I nodded, understanding, and hugged her back. I guess trust is earned, I whispered to myself. I sighed, reaching out to Piero, who smiled and pulled me up. I don't think this is very fair at all, I said. The world champion fighting some poor lost soul, I joked. Well, besides Yang, you're the only person in my skill level, she said. We aren't in class, though, I grumbled. She was showcasing a string of techniques for John, and I was a test dummy since I had a good reaction time and a sword. I felt someone jump onto my shoulder, and I looked back to see the only redhead that I knew. Decker! The only other redhead that I knew. Decker! Rest in peace, left ear. I blinked, blinded by how loud Ruby was. Well, you shouldn't have bought her a gift, Ying chuckled. Well, I don't want her feeling left out, I smiled, but it did help me figure out that the money to Leon value was 800 to 1. It was almost as amazing as Ruby's ability to jump straight onto my shoulders. But money cannot make me as happy as quickly as the happy silver-eyed reaper. Since reading was still a bit of a struggle for me, I had to find her scope by searching through hundreds of selections by hand. It's perfect for me, she exclaimed. I reached up and took her hands. I was blinded by a flash of light. If you grew a bit taller, someone might think she was your daughter, Velvet laughed. Bell rang for the end of study and the start of lunch. She examined the photo before clicking a button. It's a pudding day. Ruby jumped off my shoulder and dragged me out to the cafeteria. I raised an elbow as my sword suddenly appeared in my hand. That's weird, I thought at the back of my head. I suddenly got the strong urge to move. I pulled Ruby back and pushed her down behind me, just as a large black beast crashed through the wall. Arrow! A spear of wind appeared around us and deflected the raining debris. And deflected the raining pieces of debris. A spear of wind appeared around us and deflected the raining debris. That's a big griffin, Ruby whipped out her scythe. I blinked at the sound of that. Dang it. I muttered. What? Don't they... Watch out, they fly in packs, Pyrrha said, sprinting over to us. It pecked at the wind barrier I had created, making a loud ripping sound that triggered me to no small amount. 4 slightly smaller griffins blocked help from reaching us on the other side. Can I shoot through that, Ruby asked? First, thank you for asking. And secondly, no, you cannot, I said. The image of me and Ruby being splattered. The image of Ruby and I being splattered inside of our small wind barrier crosses my mind, and I remain grateful for a moment of foresight. So we need to time it perfectly, she said. I've got a better idea if it works out like how I think it should. Anyways, I said. I turned around and looked at RWBY. Well, I'm not going anywhere, she said, shrugging. I think this should work. This should just work since we... I think this should work since we are at the height of our friendship right now. I pointed my sword at RWBY and she blinked at me before a light pierced through her chest. RWBY! I heard Ying shout. RWBY's body was incandescent to a red glowing heart and I absorbed it. Before my vision got focused, another blade appeared in my free hand. It was silver and red and themed with rose petals, with a large silver moon connecting the 3 spiral rose petals that formed deadly beads on it. Lunar Rose came to mind immediately. I shivered uncomfortably. Do you always have this much energy? I asked. You caught me at a good time, she said, her voice coming out of my mouth. Oh my gosh, there's magic in here. You can fire a laser. How about you move and not leave the fighting to me so we don't implode or anything? Alright, but we need a name first. I twirled the 2 swords in my hands. This is my first form, so how about something nice and short? She thought for a bit. Pride, she exclaimed. Perfect, I nodded, rolling my eyes mentally. Let's go. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as RWBY launched us forward. My blades cleaved through the grim like warm butter. My blades cleaved through the... what the fuck? My blades cleaved through the... My blades cleaved through the grim like warm butter. Before we appeared in front of Yang and I broke the fusion with RWBY, sitting back on my shoulder, throwing Yang a deuces. I glanced behind us to see all the monsters drop dead. We'll fire the friendship laser next time, I promise. Yes! RWBY drummed on my head happily. Wait, we have to hurry for the pudding, she exclaimed. I chuckled and she held onto my head before I dashed off. So, are you going to explain any of that? Yang exclaimed. I don't really know what to tell you, I sighed again. I remembered how to do it in the moment, since RWBY at the time considered me your best friend. I was able to use one of the powers of my sword. But does that mean we can't do that again? RWBY asked. Well, I think it'll actually be easier next time. Since the form is officially established, I won't have to create it again. It's more like I have to reactivate it, like pressing a power button over making a computer. We could have gotten more pudding, RWBY exclaimed. I don't think I can handle doing that twice, not within the same hour. I shook my head. But that was amazing, Velvet said. You took them all down within a split second. Yeah, luckily little Rose has a great leg stamina. And I have a surprisingly good set of sword hands. Do you remember what your semblance was? Pierre asked. My what? I asked. Oh boy, Velvet said. It was your family semblance. It allowed you to befriend and speak to most animals, she said. Really? So I'm not insane. Awesome. I gave the group two thumbs up. The birds in this area never shut up. I really like birds, Buffett said, looking on her camera. I froze Ruby in place. Yeah, well, they don't talk to you about bird sex all morning long. I think that pecking sound must be a trigger for me now. I unpaused Ruby and she resumed what she was doing. Hey, are you going to eat that? Ruby poked at my pudding. Yes. I moved it away from her. Can I have a spoonful? She asked. That smells kind of fishy. And where's everyone else? I asked. They have a different lunch, John said. I noticed Velvet suddenly pipe up and turn to a table. My team got their lunch, so I'm going to go sit with them. She stood up before quickly walking away. Velvet, wait! I didn't want to be too loud or too desperate. The rebel girl turned around and I made a not all at all subtle hugging motion. She smiled and waved and continued walking off. Crash and burn. Ying smirked. I sighed, and Ruby looked a little sad for me. I'm sure she still trusts you, Ruby said. I doubt it, I deflated. I mean, I'm just trying to be me. Well, the new me. But it's hard not to possibly be nicer than I would when she has an earpiece on all the time. She has a what? John asked. Yeah, ever since we started hanging out, I noticed it. I didn't want to say anything because I know that I wasn't. No, that I treated Velvet like garbage in the past. But I gave her my word, and it's a little disheartening to see that she's still wearing it even after a full week of me trying my best. I dug through my hair and pulled out a small device. I even let this thing stay in after that girl planted on me. Yubi gave me a warm hug and offered me a cookie. I'm sure they'll trust you soon enough, I said. I ate the cookie and looked down at the small metal device. What even is this thing? It's a one-way radio, Yang said. You can talk through, but you can't hear anything. Mostly used for radio stations starting out until they get better equipment. And why do you know something like that? I asked. Because you taught me about the music industry. She flicked my nose. And you kept me from being scammed by fake producers and DJs a bunch of times, she said. So I tried to pay attention to most of your So I tried to pay attention to most of your lectures. So I was into music, I asked? No, you were into gambling, and the music industry was full of gambles. One of the lead stars is just a small gambles you had that blew up into a pop star. She was pretty devastated here when she heard what happened to you. I should reread that. She was pretty devastated when she heard what happened to you, Pyrrha said. Which reminds me, we really should give her a call. Ruby's face lit up. Can we meet Ruby's face lit up. We can meet Nikki? She turned to me. I covered her face in my hand before she could give me her puppy dog eyes. Nikki? I opened my scroll, which Ren was kind enough to. Oh shit. Which Ren was kind enough to reprogram for me. I began scrolling through a rather large list of contacts, and I stopped on Nikki Starlight and opened it. I pressed the call button and it only rang once before an image of a blue-haired girl appeared on my phone. Her face lit up. Decky, you're okay, she seemed. So, how far away are you from Beacon right now? I asked. She hung up instantly, and I raised an eyebrow. A portal appeared in front of me, and I blinked at it before. I was suddenly on the floor with a squealing blue-haired girl who was maybe 2 or 3 years younger than Ruby. She smiled and buried her face into my chest, making whatever she was saying possible to hear. Oh my god, I lifted her off in my chest. You are so adorable, she blushed. Is that Nikki Starlight? Everyone in the cafeteria exclaimed. Ruby? She nodded and refused one more time before time called to a stop. Well, this is gonna be fun, Ruby said. I put our blades away and I lifted Nikki onto our shoulders. I bit on Yang's collar and lifted Pyrrha and John under my arms. Ruby sprinted us off and up the side of the tallest tower. I put them all down. Can we go fire the laser? Ruby asked. Sure, I shrugged as time resumed, before I stabbed both blades into the ground and focused my magic in front of me. Before we both rather suddenly split into. Knew I couldn't handle it. Ugh. Felt myself collapse right onto the ground. While Nikki had been persistent on singing by Decker's side, she was happy to sing and talk to the group as long as she wasn't asked to leave him. Ruby knew the old Decker was protective. Ruby knew the old Decker was protective of all of his clients, even Blake with the one song they made. Ruby had written some songs herself, but she didn't like her singing voice, and she'd rather not bring up the reasoning behind her songs. The moment her eyes closed, she was face to face with Decker. The chocolate-haired boy blinked at her before looking down. Below them was an absolute abyss, nothing but liquid swirling darkness below. Ruby jumped and Decker bent down to touch the surface of the thick black glass, creating the illusion. Well, I guess I won't have this dream all by myself tonight, anyways. He brushed imaginary dust off himself. This is what your dreams are like? Ruby asked. Well, you missed a giant monster, so yeah, this is what the rest of my dream is. He sat down and patted his abs. We'll be here for a while, he said. I guess you could train her, Ruby said. Decker groaned, lying against the black inky floor. Here I come, Ruby charged him with a scythe appearing in her hands. Waking up, I felt even more exhausted than when I had went to bed. I yawned, and Nikki pulled the sheets up over us. It's a Saturday, she said. You can sleep in. She smiled. I combed my fingers through her hair and she snuggled into my chest. Was I always this nice to you? Oh, right, you hit your head. She looked up at me before shaking her head. Your eulogy weren't very nice. I knew that you cared, she said. Well, I think I can care and be nice at the same time. I gave her a warm squeeze. But you've probably got to go home so your family doesn't worry. She pouted, and I patted her head. She blushed. Don't get too pouty. You can sleep over every other Saturday, I said. Okay, she nodded. She created a portal and I gave her another warm hug before she left, waving. I decided setting up. Time to start another day. After reports class, I wanted to try and get some extra credit because his class being one of the few that I could understand since he talked for most of it, and his story were interesting to me as I had no recollection. Well, if you want extra credit, there was a small scouting quest I believe you could easily handle, Port said. That sounds great. When can I leave? As soon as you are prepared. As soon as you are prepared, he said. Well, I should go before someone stops me, I chuckled. So tell me the details and I'll head on out. Ah, good. I said great things from you, he smiled. I nodded and smiled back. It was a long fight. It was a long fight out before shit hit the fan. Rain clouded my ass. That swarm of Nevermore ripped through our bullhead. That swarm of Nevermore ripped through our bullhead faster than a fat kid when he found out Twinkies were on the shelves again. I blinked. Don't know where that came from. I took pictures of the large swarm of Nevermore before jumping onto my blade. My mission had been to track down a large movement of Bay Wolf that had taken down a settlement, but this storm was also worth a report. It was concerning that they were going in the same direction as the tracks I spotted from the flight here. I began flying off towards the settlement. It was a ghost town. It was obvious a fight had broken out, and I took out my scroll to take photos before going to ground level. Most of the wooden structures had been burned to the ground. I kept Last Judgment at the ready in case any stragglers were still in the area. I was going to need to find a suitable base before nightfall. It was supposed to get freezing cold out by sundown. Hello? I heard a voice. I turned to the building beside me. I heard a loud growl in the opposite direction, and a girlish scream before I was sent flying through the already weakened door. I flipped in the air before landing over the small cowering girl. Freeze! The alpha bay wolf froze in place and I picked the girl up. Are you hurt? I asked. She nodded. Alright, do you know a good place to hide? I asked. She nodded and pointed over to a trapdoor. I opened it and dropped down into a small playroom. Not depressing at all. I closed the door and sealed it with a lock, adding a tap of my blade to bolster its defense. It seemed to be pretty good at strengthening doors for some strange reason. And when the magic trickled through the wooden frame, I could tell it worked just the same. I laid the girl down on her blankets and I rested my hand on her eyes. I closed my eyes and my magic mixed into my aura to speed her recovery along. So, what's your name? I asked. She placed her hands on mine. I'm Sarah, she said. That's a very nice name, I commented, and I noticed that a pair of cat eyes. That's a very nice name, I commented. I, hmm. That's a very nice name. That sounds so fucking fake. Okay, that. That's a very nice name, I commented. I noticed that a pair of cat ears grew onto her head. Huh? I touched them, and I felt her tense under me. Are those my ears? She asked. Yeah, did something happen to them before? I asked. I gently picked her up to set her in my lap. I think they're cute. I gave her a warm hug, and she looked up at me. Really? She asked. Yep. I nodded. I scratched behind her ears, and I reached into my bag for her food and gave her some rations. Thank you. She tore open the packaging. No problem, I said. I continued scratching behind her ears gently, earning myself a light, pleasant purring from her. With any luck, we can leave in 2 days. She nodded and began eating. I guess you want to know what happened? She asked. I won't make you tell me, I said. I'm a smart guy. I think I can figure out what I need to know. She looked up at me and nodded again. I checked my scroll and saw that I got a single bar of connection. I blinked before setting it on vibrate, just before it began receiving a barrage of messages. Oh boy. I still had a very limited vocabulary as far as reading went. And while there were about 20 voice messages, I didn't know how loud they were going to be, and I had yet to buy myself a pair of headphones. What is it? She asked. I don't want the message to play too loudly. I don't know how loud my friends are going to be, I said. Why would they be loud? She asked. I didn't tell them I was leaving off on this mission, and the ship I flew here got destroyed. Since the pilot hasn't returned, they probably assume something bad has happened, I said. I think you should wait, she said. I nodded and turned off my scroll for the time being. Alright, let's get some sleep and head out early in the morning. She nodded and continued eating as I lied down. It was quite a bit of time after killing the giant monster that haunted my dreamscape before Ruby finally appeared. Hey, I waited and smiled. She crashed into me with her semblance and hand speed and knocked me onto the floor. She began pounding on my chest. We thought you were dead. Her fist lost all the strength behind her punches. Why didn't you tell anyone you were leaving? Even I know that's stupid. Oh, that's because you're a smart cookie, I sat up. Also, I know I made the right choice. The entire ship was destroyed, I said. I showed her a mental image of the cloud of darkness containing Grim storming through the air. I could only make a personal shield, and it couldn't fit all of us even if I tried. Alright, then where are you? Come on now, Ruby. Clear your head and think. I pulled her to sit on my lap with her body facing me. She went to lay into my chest. I stopped her. Come on, Rubes, you know it's a bad idea to come to try and find me, I said. But how are you going to get back? She asked. When I wake up, I'm going to send Port the images I took of the swarm, and then I'll wait until it's dealt with before you can all send a bullet out. When I wake up, I'm going to send a port. When I wake up, I'm going to send Port the images I took of the swarm, and then I will wait until it's dealt with before you can all send a bullethead. But what am I supposed to do? She asked. Visit me every night so I don't give up hope. I ruffled her hair. Also, don't go letting anyone think I'm dead again. I ruffled her hair. I ruffled her hair and she smiled. Velvet was crying. She thought you had left before. There was a loud roar and I was forced awake. My eyes snapped towards Sarah and I quickly grabbed her. I pulled her into my chest. Arrow. The roof crashed down on us as a massive black bear came falling down into the playroom. I jumped out of the hole I created and only got a glimpse of the massive black furs before I felt us get smacked, sending us through a wall. I watched the building crumble as it left us what? I watched the building crumble as it left us and what the fuck? Alright, fuck that little bit. I watched the I watched the building crumble as I rolled onto the floor before touching Sarah below me as massive bodies rushed over to us. End of chapter 1.